Hello and welcome to Radical Disruption. Today's episode is with Michelle Pualani. Michelle has navigated a transformative, tumultuous journey in the digital space. She initially launched an online program for healthy habit formation, and after a successful beta run, faced setbacks in subsequent launches. Over the past 5 years, Michelle has experienced numerous pivots, attempted multiple launches, and absorbed valuable lessons. After investing over $60,000 in coaching programs and courses on digital marketing, she realized her true passion lay beyond fitness. This realization led her to shift her focus to coaching clients in marketing and business. Leveraging her background in behavior change, Michelle now helps business owners prioritize self care and work life balance while enhancing their lead generation strategies to achieve their goals without sacrificing their well being. With a unique blend of business acumen and a passion for personal development, Michelle has dedicated her career to simplifying the complexities of online business. Michelle's approach is rooted in practical, actionable steps that empower her clients to regain control of their time and focus on what matters most. Her methodologies not only enhance business performance, but also promote personal well being, ensuring that her clients can enjoy their success to the fullest. Passionate about making a positive impact, Michelle continues to inspire and guide entrepreneurs to become the CEOs of their well being, achieving high energy and maximum impact in their business and life. In this episode, we dive into creating a work life balance and what the word balance even means and why it should be important to you. Let's dive into the conversation. Hello, I have Michelle here with me, and I am so excited to dive in and talk a little bit more about her story. So I'm just going to hand it straight off to her. Michelle, what is your entrepreneur story? How did you get started, and where are you at today?
Mine is very tumultuous, and I hope that a lot of us can relate to that as entrepreneurship and business ownership. I feel like takes you in a lot of different twists and turns. I know that Maya, you started in an industry and then transitioned to Instagram and social media content. I think we move through evolutions, and mine is definitely no exception. So, I really started in business ownership when I was in the fitness and health realm, and I taught bar, yoga, functional fitness, personal training. I transitioned a little bit into health coaching. I was deep and heavy in the fitness realm.
Yeah.
And I wanted my own clients. I wanted my own programs. I wanted my own courses because at the time I worked for gyms and studios. I also wanted more freedom, right? That's a huge desire that we all have. We have this desire for time freedom, financial freedom, and what it would look like to govern our own lives and be really independent in that way. And so that's when I started exploring what that might look like. And then there are a lot of avenues we know that we can go into. So I started actually doing programs for other businesses. So Daily Ohm is an example where I started doing courses and content creation that would create some form of passive income for me from the start. And then I got into my own program. So I started creating courses, retreats, online offers, and again, coaching one to one to be able to like segue into that space. I will say when I first got started, I didn't really see my business as a business. And that was one of the like biggest mistakes that I made in entrepreneurship is that I just saw it as like, oh, this thing that I'm just doing or this
Yeah.
opportunity that I should just try, like an experimentation. I don't know if you ever had that experience as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. Where it was just like, I don't know, we're just gonna see where this goes. That was me when I started my business. I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I don't really call this like an official business because of that. So I can totally relate.
Yeah, I just cuz was just diving in and I'm just going to try this. I'm going to go this direction. Maybe I'll do this thing. So I started in that fitness world and it evolved from there and I did a lot of different programs. I did some corporate workshops and I did a lot of different things that again were in that kind of like health, fitness, self-care realm. And as I
At this,
evolved, go ahead.
can I pause real quick?
Yeah,
At this
go ahead.
time, were you working another job, or was this all that you were doing?
So, no, I was still teaching at the time. So,
Okay.
I was technically, if you looked at my like career, I was on the trajectory to be a full-time like fitness person. That meant that I was actively in a studio setting or actively with clients or in some way like teaching or training. And so that's what I was doing full-time, working with several different studios and gyms at a local level. And so then I started with the online courses again as a side thing, or maybe if I can make enough money with this, then I can transition. And then it evolved from there. And I will say, I feel like everyone had their different responses to COVID. And I know that it was a while ago, but I feel like it took me down like a lot and it really
Yeah.
set me back. And it was a difficult time for me because I felt like, well, I'm fine. We're fine. We're in a small town. We have access to the outdoors. My
Yeah.
family's safe. My partner's safe. We have income coming in. And so I held back on growing my business at that time because I felt like, well, no, I want to send clients to this person or I want to send people here. And
Mm,
it totally backfired because it, for some reason, just set me back in this big way when I was on this like growth trajectory when it came to my own courses and programs. And so let's just fast forward. And then I ended up actually doing marketing and business consulting. And I stumbled into that. Like people started asking me, what are you doing? How are you doing it? What is this content creation thing? What are courses? And that's when I started taking on clients. And I didn't build a business around that either. We're seeing a theme here, but I didn't build a business around that either. It was just sort of, it was coming to me and I was getting word of mouth referrals and I was working with people on their email automations and their landing pages and their course building and their membership build out and social media content strategy and almost like a fractional CMO to that extent. And
yeah.
that's kind of where I was for a while. And then again, transition, pivot, try to change things up. And I wanted to focus on like helping clients really prioritize themselves, which is exactly where the Michelle Pualani brand has come from. And then I also have an extension of Her Healthy Habits, which is more in the healthy habit formation for like high achieving professionals. And so I have a program on that front. And then I also have a physical product business. So my attention has been diverted and unfocused for quite some time, but I think it's a natural part of the evolution. And I'm finally starting to, I feel like, ground into what that looks like and how it aligns with me and what that purpose is. Because I think as business owners, as entrepreneurs, we have to sink into whatever that, some people use the term heart driven, but like mission driven identity and purpose to be able to show up in alignment with what it is that we want to do in the world.
I love that so much. And I think that I can relate to that. I've pivoted so many times in my journey, and I know that so many people listening can relate to that. But I think also too, the hard thing for a lot of people is understanding when to pivot. And so you've had quite the journey, lots of different pivots. What was that pivotal moment for you? Or maybe there were multiple moments that really made you realize that your true passion wasn't fitness and that you wanted to move in a different direction.
Feedback from other people was actually a big source of that. And I
Mm,
felt like I wasn't getting traction either. So I had been creating content online, I'd been doing interviews, I'd been doing all the quote unquote like right things when
yeah.
it comes to driving traffic and getting out there. And I had the landing pages and I had the nurture sequences and I had the upsells. It's like everything that we know about digital marketing, I was doing, but
Yeah.
like something wasn't tractioning and people weren't coming into my orbit and I wasn't building the community that I really wanted and really desired. And then I started just connecting with other business owners and getting feedback from the masterminds and the groups that I was in, that when I talked about fitness specifically and sometimes even like healthy habits as a whole in line with just like health and well-being without the more integrated like mindset piece of it and the mental fitness piece of it, it felt like there was something lacking. Like it lacked enthusiasm, it lacked the passion, it lacked the interest. And I started getting that feedback from multiple channels. And then when I would shift to talking about like digital marketing or kind of like the mindset and the psychology behind how we approach our businesses and the way in which we show up in our businesses, that's when it felt like I was lighting up for myself. And that's when I got the positive feedback from others that kind of reinforced the pivot. So it was seeing the metrics, right? What wasn't working from a tangible perspective. And then also the feedback and the softer things that I was hearing, seeing, feeling that made me feel like I'm going to shift, I'm going to move in this different direction. So that's what inspired the pivots.
I love that. Was it really hard to step away from an industry that you had been in for so long? Were you scared of the uncertainty of moving in a direction that, again, there just wasn't a lot of certainty in it? And that's obviously it is just how entrepreneurship is, where it's like there is nothing is fully certain, but being in an industry that you knew and you knew the ins and outs of it and you knew how to make money in that industry, was it scary pivoting into a totally separate industry?
I think I've always had a little bit of like jump and the net will appear kind of energy. I thrive off of change. Yeah. I thrive off of change.
What is your human design, if you don't mind me asking? Do you know what it is?
I'm a generator.
Okay. Okay.
Someone told me once I'm a little confused on the human design thing because someone actually looked up my chart and they said I was a projector. And then someone else said I was a generator. So I don't have all the information, but I think I'm a generator.
Yeah, I would say based off of what I'm picking up, I'm not a human design expert in any way, shape, or form, but I think that you're a generator. I was just curious. So,
Yeah.
anyways, yeah,
No, I'm
yeah. So you're a jump and just like I'm gonna figure it out type of gal. I love that.
Yeah, I'm going to figure it out. And I've been so used to change most of my life. And that goes into like my personal experiences and my childhood and my family and my environment shifting. So I will say there are a lot of us that need security. And so I think this is such a great conversation for each of us who's going through a journey of self discovery or personal growth, which entrepreneurship is. I think they're one and the same. It's going to
Yes.
push you to, yeah, it's going to push you to evolve. It's going to push you to become aware of who you are at your core, how you show up in the world. You're going to question your belief systems. You're going to question your identity. You're going to question how you see yourself and how you engage with other people. So, as part of that, I felt like I welcomed that. It wasn't necessarily fear, but I
Yeah.
will say that there are feelings of disappointment, frustration, agitation that I think are more like doubt. So,
Yeah.
as whereas I'm like excited to make the change, excited to make the pivot. Like we launched a non-alcoholic hemp infused spirit last year in an industry that I knew nothing about and had never been a part of, but now we have a physical product and we're distributing and we're online sales and that's just you just figure it out. I think that that problem solving side of entrepreneurship helps with that. So I can't say that it's like really fearful, although I know for a lot of people who security and knowing having either finances or location or relationships, like some of us need more security than others. And so if you're listening and if you're feeling like, gosh, I am afraid of change, I am afraid of what that newness looks like or that pivot, it's not necessarily something wrong with you. It's just a different set of values, sense of self, and ways of being, and their ways of questioning that and doing something different. So it wasn't necessarily fear, but if anything, I have experienced more doubt and lack of belief in myself than anything else. And that's been a huge inhibiting factor for me and the progression of how I feel like I've moved through the pivots altogether.
Wow, that was very beautifully said. You're very eloquent when you speak. I'm like, I need some of that in my life. Something else that is very interesting too about your journey is when you were in the fitness industry, you were creating these online digital products, but then you decided, even after having several quote unquote, I say failed launches, I don't necessarily believe in failure, but you had these launches that didn't go as planned with these digital products, and then you decided to then pivot into another like digital space. What motivated you to continue on in that journey in the digital space, having had experiences that were not up to necessarily your standard, not, and then moving into an industry where you're going to have to create the same digital products and go through launches and do all of that again?
Let's just first say probably naivety. Like I definitely think I had like less knowledge and experience at that time. And so I think I was coming from a place of like bold confidence in the fact that it would work and that
Yeah.
it was more so just like the way that I was approaching it. Now, when it comes to pivots, there's, I think, a difference between pivoting industries or pivoting passions, pivoting what
Mhm.
aligns to you versus pivoting on a product or offer or program, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I did wrong and a mistake that I hope to communicate to anyone who will listen is that I didn't allow enough time, enough experimentation, which I saw a post about that you did recently about experimenting. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, you need to experiment and you need to
Yeah.
not take it personally. So
Yeah.
with those failed launches, I internalized them and I made them
Yeah.
about me. There's something wrong with me. People don't want to work with me. There's something wrong with the program because I created it. And instead of taking that information, which is exactly what it is, all of the quote unquote failed launches or the mistakes that you make, it's just information. Instead of
Yeah.
taking that information, understanding the metrics, and being able to then say, I have this amazing program, I just have to reframe how I'm marketing it. I've got to
Yeah.
change the marketing. I've got to change the offer proposition. I've got to change the value of it.
Yeah.
I pivoted in programs. So I just started making like program after program after program and
Yeah.
never doing any of them justice. And that's where I feel like I failed and obviously learned, right? Because it's not a
Yeah.
failure. I kept going. And so, really, I think the resilience was partly due to just not knowing and feeling, I just got to figure this out. I'm going to figure it out. And
Yeah.
then also deciding at some point, this was later on, but I feel like I got to a point where I decided that this is my path. Like I'm creating personal brands, I'm creating businesses, I'm creating opportunities in the digital space, and I see the digital space as my industry. And so once I made that commitment, I stopped thinking about like, oh, well, maybe I should just get a job here, or maybe I should just do this other thing, or maybe I should change this. And so that's when I feel like I really started to say it could take me 10 years. And I'm like, I don't have the success that I want to have now. Like, very
Yeah.
transparently, my businesses are not at the level that I want them to be. My community, my traffic, like, not at all where I want it to be. But I'm not going to stop. And I think we each for ourselves have to just decide, what is that why factor? What's driving us? What are we working toward? And invest in the longevity of what it is that we're doing. I think a lot of people get into the online space and they look at digital marketing and it's, oh, I can make money in 10 days doing this, or I can sell this thing. And
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with having that excited perspective and like sense of opportunity, but I'm in it for the long haul. I'm creating the longevity of a career and a way in which I'm showing up. And that means integrity in the way that I promote. It means integrity in my products and programs. And it means like staying true to who I am as a person. And whereas certain things might get me the financial gain faster, I'd rather compromise and invest in the long term impact of what I'm here to do.
That's so good. What would you say to someone who's like, I also want that, but I'm getting caught up in the shiny objects of that short term success? Because I think every person listening to this is looking for that long term where they're like, yeah, I'm committed. But I think it's one thing to say it, and it's another thing to like actually take action on that thing. And it's hard. It really is hard because there are so many shiny objects out there and short term gains and different trends and different tactics out there that you could utilize to get that short term success that do seem very enticing. But how can you stay on track?
I think it's a few things. One of which is I feel like I've done that already. And so now I had to learn my lesson the hard way. Like I've been through it. So anyone who's going through it, if you're listening and you're like, I tend to be drawn to a lot of different things, I've just been chasing, you might just have had that experience in order to transition and grow. They call it the dark night of the soul and personal development and growth, but sometimes you have to go through the difficulty, the challenge, the drudgery, the being distracted, the being unfocused, the trying 10 businesses and having them fail in order to get to where it is that you want to be in the long term. And so it's not necessarily wrong or a bad thing that someone's getting unfocused and being attracted to the shiny syndrome or that idea,
Yeah.
right? But for each of us, I think it takes reflection. I think it takes awareness. I think it takes seeing what's actually happening, because I think what I see in like the coaching space and in my like mastermind groups and what I hear and see at that level, it's that a lot of times that distracted feeling, that shiny object syndrome, is because they have some sense of doubt. They have
Yeah.
something within them that tells them that the track they're on isn't the right one. And so if it's
Mm,
like, for let's just say you're creating an Amazon store and that's your thing.
yeah.
And maybe it's not fractioning as quickly as you want it to. And then you're like, oh, wait, but someone had success creating templates on Etsy. So now I'm going to focus on that. And now I'm going to create that. But then it's not fractioning. It's not doing exactly what you want it to do. And then, okay, now I'm going to shift to MRR. Now I'm going to shift to this. Now I'm going to shift. There's a million ways to make money in this world. There's a million ways to build a business. There's a million ways to create a brand. And we have doubt within ourselves that we need to be able to master to some degree. And we need to be able to say, no, I'm going to stop paying attention to those things. I'm going to focus. I think the other thing that I'll close on with getting distracted is that I pay a lot of attention to mentors who have been in the industry for a long time. And so I'm
Mm,
watching people who have been here for 10 years, 20 years, and I'm listening to what they say and I'm consuming their content and reading the books and listening to the podcasts. And they
yeah.
each share the struggles that they had in creating and doing different businesses and having them fail and having that be a part of their journey and their process, while also having them reinforce the idea of focus and
Yep.
intention. And so it's just had to be, I feel like, a hard lesson that I've learned. And I think for someone listening, if they are struggling with it, knowing that it's not a bad thing that they have, but just like health and wellness, just like healthy habits, it's a matter of deciding. I know that I can try 10 different diets and see if that works for me, or I can
Yeah.
focus on this one intentionally for a long period of time. And I think once you start to shift the mindset to what does this mean for me a year from now? What does this mean for my business 5 years from now? You start to
Yep.
make decisions differently in the present. And so I think that can be a helpful thing is start to think forward and say, what is this root? How is this really serving me in the long term? And how can
Yeah.
I shift my attention in that way?
That makes me think of a quote that I actually screenshotted. Someone I follow posted this yesterday. She said, "Make decisions from the perspective of who you want to become." And I was like, ooh, that was so good. But it also makes me think about, too, how if you are doing 10 different things, your energy is split between those 10 different things versus if you choose one thing and you go all in on that one thing, you're going to go faster doing that. And it might seem slow to get started because most things take time to create momentum. Like momentum, it doesn't just happen, it's created over time. And
Hmm.
so you're most of the time when you start something, you're in the creation of that momentum. You're like, oh my gosh, this is taking so long. And then you're like, oh, that's when people are starting to be like, oh, well, maybe I should try this or maybe I should add on this. And it's like, then you're just slowing down the momentum even more and you're splitting your energy between all these things. And I was listening or I was watching a Netflix show. I don't remember what it's called, but it's not Selling Sunsets, but it's one that's like a New York version. And one of the people that was, I think it's like the head guy, he was talking about how his plan B is bankruptcy. And I'm like, I don't necessarily think that we should all get to that point, but he was basically just like implying that like there is no plan B. Like I'm going to make this work no matter what. And I'm like, I think there's so much power in that energy of just going all in. But again, though, I agree where it's like you do have to try the things to be able to figure out which direction that you want to go. And I do think that there is power, at least in the beginning of your journey, in experiencing those different things. Like I think about me in my journey, I did the network marketing, but I also said yes to opportunities doing social media management and also said yes to,
Hmm.
I think there's like countless different things that I did before I even started my business. And so I was in that, like, I'm putting my time and energy in all these different places, but there was that period for me of experimenting and trying to figure out the direction that I actually wanted to go and invest my time and energy into. So I think that there's different stages as to like what, and again, like you were saying too, there's a billion different ways to build a business and be successful, but I do think that there is power, at least in the beginning of your journey, in dipping your toes in maybe a few different avenues just to see what is the best thing for you. But then once you decide, like, there is also power in going all in on that thing too. So I think it just depends on where you're at in your journey. There's one question that I want to ask you before I dive into your expertise and we can talk about work life balance. But I am so intrigued by this. You had this in your bio and you said that you have invested $60,000 into coaching and courses. And I'm assuming that that was specifically inside of space, but I would love to know what are some of the lessons that you learned from investing that amount of money and how shaped your current approach to educating your community, having invested that amount of money into education yourself, and also how has it shaped your approach to investing in education now in the business that you are in?
So I definitely believe that wherever we put our time, energy, attention is an investment, right? Financials is part of that, but our time and energy is just as important in my book. Having been what feels pulled in a lot of different directions, and again, I'm learning the lesson of focus. I've spent a lot of time without the focus. And so I'm at a point where it's like, okay, we're going to hone in on this. We're going to focus in on this. We're going to prioritize in a way that I never have before with my
Yeah.
brands and businesses. But where we invest our time, energy, and resources should produce some sort of ROI in our businesses, whether that's a lesson learned, or whether that's actual finances, or whether that is community or networking or opportunities in other doors. And so I don't see anything that I've invested as just like, oh, well, that was just money gone. And I
Yeah.
think we can shift the perspective on those investments in that way to say, this is a positive thing that I got out of this and how it can transform and grow myself as an individual or obviously my business. Now, that being said, I think that a couple of the things that I've been able to extract from that experience, because that investment has been in courses, it's been in like in person events, it's been in individual coaches, it's been in mastermind groups, it's been at a lot of different levels. And with each of that, trying to extract out what's worked for me. But I've realized that no one is doing things in the way that's exactly going to work for you. I think that there's so much information in the online space, and I'm so grateful that there are so many teachers and so many mentors and so many coaches because everyone kind of fits differently into who's talking. Like people who are going to be attracted to you are going to be the people, not necessarily people who are attracted to me, and versus that other person and that other brand and business.
Yeah.
And so everyone's doing things in their own way. And so I think in the beginning, I thought I had to follow a specific and particular path. If I only just did it the way that this person was doing it, then I would see the success. If I only followed their like 5-step plan, then it would happen. And I think I had a lot of grasping at the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. I was like really reaching and trying to hold on to and control the results or the outcome. And I
Yeah.
am a great learner. I'm a great student. And so I would go through the programs and I would do it how they said, and I wouldn't get the same results. And part of that was not really understanding the metrics at the time, because even though everything I was doing, it was on a small scale. So, for example, there was a launch that I did in relation to it was paid advertising up front. I was getting super cheap leads because this was years
Yep.
ago. And then I was getting like a 75% opt-in rate on my free lead magnet. I had 2,600 leads that came through. I had my nurture sequence and everything else, but I wasn't selling people in the back end. And so instead of looking at that more critically and saying, oh, like I just need to tweak this piece here, or I need to change, again, the value proposition, the offer, I looked at the entire thing and thought I was a failure. Or if I was converting at 2% on the back end of what I was selling, but I was only making several $100s, I thought that was a failure because everyone else was doing $10,000 launches or $100,000 launches, or they were making X. What I didn't realize is that they were at a very different level and they had a much different influx of
Yeah.
traffic than I did. And so their scale was different. So lessons that I've learned through that experience of investment were really like not to compare myself to what I was seeing, especially on social media on the front side. But even when I got into the back end of other people's businesses, like I've worked with 6 and 7 figure businesses who have huge online presence, who have tons of programs, like lots of things going on, big names, and realizing they don't have anything secretive. There's nothing behind the curtain that I wasn't doing myself.
Yeah.
That was a really big learning lesson for me in seeing it's not anything magic. I can do this and I
Yeah.
have the systems and I can make this happen. And then the other piece of that you mentioned is like how I bring this out to my programs.
Yeah.
It's not in a negative way, but there are things that I've seen in the coaching industry, in the program industry, in our digital education space that I don't believe in, and that
Yeah.
I think is differentiated between my ethics and how I want to show up and help and support people. And
Yeah.
so I did have one really bad experience with a coach that I learned so many lessons from. And it really honestly actually catapulted me into business and marketing because I was so frustrated with that experience.
Yeah.
And it did help me realize I want to create products and programs that have integrity, that really help and support and almost go above and beyond. And I will say that's to the detriment of my financial success in business because I've probably poured more into those things or clients at the beginning, but I think it'll
Yeah.
pay off in the long run because I'm really in tune with over delivering. And I have a mentor that says under promise and over deliver. And he does that every single time with his products, programs, workshops, retreats, events, and mastermind, everything that he does. And I really want that to be the case as well, is that I want people to hear about me, know me, learn about me, get into my products and programs and feel like, whoa, like this is amazing. And she's
Yeah.
amazing and she's here to support me and she really cares about me. Because
Yeah.
I think that there are too many people in our industry, in our space, and I know that you probably see this all the time too, is that people are just interested in that financial success. They're interested in the numbers and the metrics, and they're interested in whatever it is that is not in integrity. And so I just want that to be a part of our education space and the creator economy is I want there to be maintained integrity. And that's one of the things that I feel like I've really pulled out of investments and learning from past experiences.
I love that so much. And I have also invested lots in education in my business. And I can totally relate to that, where I've had really great experiences where I pulled different things where I'm like, oh my gosh, I love that they did XYZ. And I've also had some not so great experiences where it's really helped me to understand the things that I value and the things that I want to bring to the forefront. And like you were saying, there's lessons to be learned, whether it was a positive or a negative experience. But I think the most important thing is like pulling those lessons out. Okay, I want to talk a little bit more about pivoting the conversation to your expertise. So your expertise lies in helping business owners prioritize self-care and work-life balance. How do you define work-life balance? Because I have me personally, I'm like the word balance, I don't always feel the most in tune with just because it makes me think of 50-50. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes. So this is definitely a conversation that I feel like I've had on my podcast and that people have asked about before. And I think it's something that people almost it's like a touchy subject. I've seen content around work-life balance isn't the thing and balance is
Yeah.
impossible. And I think it's the perception of balance. So I was a philosophy major
Mhm.
and one of my favorite topics was philosophy of language. And so we embed meaning into language. And if you're into neurolinguistic programming or anything having to do with the subconscious mind, language determines a lot for us. And so I shared this story once, and actually I think it'll be important here in the discussion, is that if you were to, and I know you have a baby, a child, a daughter, correct?
Yes.
So I don't have kids, but I have two nieces and one nephew. And one of the nieces I'm very close to, she lives close to me. And so if I were to look at her and say, throughout your life, never expect to maintain work life balance. You're always going to be compromising. You're always going to be sacrificing. You're actually going to work yourself so much and you're going to sacrifice your boundaries and you're not going to be able to establish a sense of like healthy balance within yourself so that you feel peaceful and calm when everything else is going around you. That to me feels like I'm doing her a disservice because I'm taking my belief system around balance and I'm telling her that it's not possible.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to healthy habits and work life balance, I think it looks different for everybody else. I,
Yeah.
I don't think that any two people should have the same concept or the same definition or the same schedule of what work life balance looks like for them because we're
Yeah.
also different. And that's one of my like big belief systems when it comes to all of my programs and all of the healthy habit formation and the Fit CEO program that I have is that someone is determining for themselves what that looks like, which is, I think, why I strayed away from the fitness and nutrition industry is because it was very cookie cutter. Like it was a
Yeah.
lot of time, like, follow this diet, follow this fitness program. It's the same for me as it is for you.
Yeah.
And whereas there are obviously principles that apply, and again, same
Yeah.
thing in business, there are principles that apply, right? Like you teach amazing principles that are great and applicable for everyone.
Yeah.
But how they actually manifest in that person's life is going to be different. How it manifests in that person's business is going to be different because we're all each individual and unique in that way. And we should be. When it comes to work life balance, we each have a different way in engaging with that. I follow Alex and Layla Hermosi, and they work like maniacs. They have ridiculous schedules, but they're
Yeah.
also incredibly successful. But I saw something the other day about Layla saying that they work with their family and their friends. And so instead of taking time out for family and friends and other activities, they see them and they work with them and they engage with them in that way. And so
Mhm.
that to me is a healthy work life balance. I think it comes from the individual and how they feel internally. For
Mhm.
example, if we're feeling like we're always in a state of chaos and I'm being pulled in this direction and I have to take care of this and I have this unending to do list and I feel completely overwhelmed, that's not in a state of work life balance. It doesn't matter actually how many hours you're working. right?
Mm.
Someone could be working 10 hours a week and they can still feel like that stress and that chaos. Someone could be working 60 hours a week, but feel calm, at peace. They feel in charge of their schedule, in charge of their time. They feel like they have the freedom or the investment of energy into the things that they want and that they're prioritizing. They're taking care of their sense of self, sleep, food, workout, movement, friends, community, whatever. So I think for us, we each need to determine what that work life balance looks like and stop trying to feed into what other people are telling us. Like, you need to have this specific morning routine in the morning. You need to do this at night. You need to be getting 10 hours of sleep. You need to be working out in this way. It's just all so different for each of us. And so each of us has the ability to decide if balance is something that we crave and want, and then figure out how to do that. I realize with families, it's a lot harder, but investing the time and being present in what it is that you're doing, I think can help in that direction. I think Arianna Huffington, I read a couple of her books, The Sleep Revolution and then Thrive. And ultimately, she had a really pivotal moment for her when she was compromising on her time, compromising on her family, compromising on her health. And she ended up passing out in her home office. She hit her face on the side of her desk and woke up with a broken nose and went to the hospital. And that was her wake up call to realize, what am I doing? I have all
Yeah.
of this financial success. I have the ability to govern my own schedule, and yet I am compromising at all of these levels on my health and well being in order to what? Chase the next success milestone, do this
Yeah.
thing. And so her whole platform is actually about prioritizing yourself, your well being, creating the pillars of balance in your wellness so that you not only reach the same level of success that you were sacrificing, hustling, compromising for, but reach even beyond that. So that's my perspective on work life balance, and not so short of an answer. But I think that we all have the ability to determine what that looks like for ourselves and then decide whether it's something that we're going to take part in. But I don't think it's fair for us to say that work life balance isn't possible for anyone else and take that from them.
No, I love that so much. And I do think that for me, the perspective that I think of when I hear like work life balance is, oh, you need to work X amount of hours per day and have X amount of time with your, like, I feel like society is like ingrained that in my brain as like a certain set amount of time. And I even talked about this in a podcast episode probably like a year ago, I think. But I was talking about how like the 4 hour workday is just like not enticing to me. That's just not something that I want, but it is something that a lot of people out there do want. That's what they strive for. That's amazing. Or the 4 hour work week or whatever. If that is like what brings you happiness, then that's great. And so I think that for me, I almost think of like work life balance being like what is fulfilling and happy in the way that you are structuring your day to day. I love that so much. For the person that's listening to this thinking, okay, I'm not feeling that fulfillment in my day to day. I do feel burnt out from my work, or I feel like I'm always going, 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 and I do feel disorganized and rushed. What is like that first step in moving in a direction where they can start to find balance?
All of my programs always start with a step zero. And so most of us always want to take action. We're usually looking at products and programs that incorporate in, oh, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to add on. This is how you need to change things. When realistically, and this came from personal training and health coaching, whenever I was assessing. And so a lot of times I would ask people up front in whatever that intake, not interview, but that intake appointment was, and they would tell me information, write it down. And then we would do a recording process, basically. So a tracking process throughout a week. And then at the end of that week, every single time, without fail, they would come back with me to say, I didn't realize I was. I had no idea I was. And what is being demonstrated with that is that we lack a sense of awareness. Like a lot of times, we're in that place of chaos and feeling overwhelmed and overrun, and we don't have any time because we don't actually know where our time is going. We don't know
Mhm.
how we're investing it. We don't know what our like actual schedule looks like. We don't know where our mind is. And so I always start with a step zero, which is awareness. Is like we need to bring awareness to the forefront, and we need to become aware of what we're doing, how we're doing, the way in which we're being, then the decisions we're making from that place. So once you bring awareness, then you can start to think about, what do I do from here? And my preference is actually to detract. So what are we going to take away? What are we going to say no to? What are the boundaries that we're going to set? And then we can add on from there based on creating the time and space, because we all have the same amount of time. And I always like to use this analogy is like Beyonce, Taylor Swift, like we all have the same amount of time in a day. They don't
Yeah.
have any magical time. And granted, you can argue, okay, they have support teams and they're at this level and they have all this money and blah, blah, blah. They didn't start that way. Like everyone started from scratch. All of the business owners that you see as successful, all of the
Yeah.
mentors that we look up to, they started from zero, and you can learn their heroes, their hero stories. You can learn their stories and you can hear them talk about from where they started. And so we all have to just bring a sense of awareness to what it is that we're doing and how we're showing up in the world. And then we can start to make change and pivot from there. So a lot of people, when they're in that place of something is not working for me and I want to change, and what they'll do when it comes to behavior change, which is my like focus, when they try to change behavior, they'll just dive in and be like, oh, okay, great. I saw this person on social media say that I can do this morning routine, or if I start drinking this thing, or if I start just doing this meditation. And then they'll try to just add it on their already chaotic and hectic lives. And that's why 92% of resolutions fail by like the end of January into February, because we're not looking at behavior change from a really like intentional perspective. We're just being like, oh, I want to do that thing. Let me try it. And it doesn't work. So that's what I would suggest, is bring awareness to it first. I have tracking journals in my programs, and that's where I think everyone should start, is like even just on a piece of paper or a journal. What do you do when you first wake up in the morning? What are your first thoughts? What do you eat during the day? Where's your movement? How much time are you spending on this activity? Like time tracking will make you aware of so much. You'll literally just start to change just based on that awareness.
I love that. I was trying to see if I had written this down in my notes. I always write down random things, but there was something that I think it was on a podcast a few weeks ago that I was listening to. They were talking about how I think it was like 90%. Don't quote me on this, but I think it was like 90% of our thoughts every single day are like on autopilot. We don't even realize. And maybe it was our thoughts, maybe it was our actions. We're always on autopilot and we're just doing the same things over. And then, like you were saying, we look back and we're like, wait, what were we even doing? Or why was I even doing that? Or I didn't even know that I was doing that. Having awareness, but then breaking those things up into things that were like, oh yes, I do want to do this, or yes, I do need to do this, or I don't need to do this, like breaking those things up and creating that, I guess not separation, but what am I trying to say, like when you're doing the same thing over and over again, like just, you know what I'm trying to say.
Break the habit or break the pattern, like yeah, create a pattern. It's called a pattern interrupt technically, if you were looking at the things that you're doing, and that is like at a subconscious level, it's just on repeat.
Yeah.
Like your thoughts, your subconscious mind is just working on repeat. Have always been aware. So meditation, visualization, and the mindset piece has always been integrated into what I've done. But especially now, I am learning so much more about what happens at the subconscious level and why we have the habits and behaviors that we do. Because when you look at it from like an overarching perspective, you think about, okay, like this is what's showing up in my life. These are the results. And then if you backtrack from the results, it's okay, well, this was the pattern or the action that like caused that. And then, okay, what caused that? And you start to go back. And it all comes from this subconscious patterning. And so when you have a pattern interrupt, that's when you start to make the distinction between, oh, I've thought the same thing 10 times. What if I change that? What if I shift that? What if I redirect?
I love that. Thanks for saving me. I was like, I know what I'm trying to say, but I don't know what I'm trying to say. My head says one thing, my mouth is just not saying it. Okay, pattern disruption, which I love the word disruption because obviously this
Mhm.
podcast is radical disruption. But we've talked about work life balance. We've talked about some practical strategies to be able to start to create more balance. What role does this play though for entrepreneurs, especially when it comes to, you talk a lot about like lead generation strategies and like achieving your business goals. And I think that oftentimes when we think about like work-life balance and self-care, and then we think about our business, we think of them as two separate things, but we don't see them as integrated beings. So how do you teach that self-care is also helping you to generate your sales, your leads, anything that you want in your business?
Yeah. This is such a good question because it's definitely something I've struggled to do. I think that I've always come at marketing from a practitioner perspective, from like a coach mentality. And I know that's not the right direction. And so that's something I'm working on. And I love your content when it comes to Instagram and social because it's something that it's a skill set that I'm still working on building. I feel like I'm getting really close, but it's a skill set that I'm definitely working on building to be able to communicate the value of what this does for you. And you're right, we do often think of them in silos, but I like to ask people like if you got sick tomorrow or if you came, let's just knock on wood, obviously never want this happen, if someone came down with an illness in which they had to be hospitalized or if they were compromised in some way or if someone they needed if they were taken out in some way, what does that mean for your business? And for a lot of us, even though we have automations and systems in place, for a lot of us, we are our businesses. And so when you think about it that way, it's okay, if you are your business, wouldn't you want the most thriving, energetic, exuberant, like representation of you to show up in that business? And so I've tried to communicate it a little bit more from the sense of like, how are you showing up in your content? Are you happy to get in front of the camera? Are you feeling vibrant? Do you feel like you look good? You're confident? If not, that has to do with you, your personal like self care and how you're taking care of yourself, right? If you are
Mm,
showing up to your coaching calls like lacking energy or you're feeling that fatigue like in the afternoon, that has to do with how you're taking care of yourself when it comes to health and well-being. And although I can't necessarily track the self-care to sales, which when I can and I can do that, that is totally a product and program that I'm going to develop and create. Noted for next time. But it ultimately comes down to Arianna Huffington, that same revelation that she had and why she created Thrive in the first place is that because she truly believes, and at her level, if you don't know, look up Arianna Huffington. She created the Huffington Post. She's incredibly influential, does conferences all over the world, retreats. She is one of the biggest media companies with Thrive Global. And so when that person at that level is telling me, as someone who's technically a nobody compared to her, that if you prioritize your self care, your state of being, your wellness, and you will not only see success, but go beyond it, that's something that I have to pay attention to. And if you are tired or if you're frustrated or if you're agitated, are you going to sit down and do the work that you know that you're meant to? Probably not. Is it going to be as good as you want? And there's a lot of energetics and I feel like alignment that comes into what it is that we do, embedding into our business as personal brands that I feel like needs more attention. And that, again, if you are wanting to be the best version of yourself or the most highest level or whatever language you want to use, then that takes really caring for yourself. And I think even more than self care is like self compassion, true self love, like self acceptance. And we talk a lot about authenticity in our personal brands and showing up as yourself. And Maya, I think you do this so beautifully and I've been watching you for so long. And I love the way that you show up in your brand, in your content. And you can't always do that if you don't love, care, respect, and accept yourself, right?
yeah,
Because you probably don't know yourself as well, right?
yeah,
I could keep going on because I feel like the list is incredibly long. But for anyone listening, it's the fact of the matter that you are what it is that you're doing and what you're bringing into the world. So, whether you believe that's like a conduit and you're channeling ideas and concepts from the universe, or whether that is you're the creator and you're bringing concepts and ideas to life via video or
yeah.
copy or products and programs, what do you really want that to look like? And I think caring for yourself at a deeper level, and I'm not just talking self care. A lot of people are like, get your nails done and do your hair. And
Yeah.
that's not necessarily the self care that I'm talking about here. I'm talking about like really being compassionate with your body and your mind and your soul, giving yourself time and space for rest, doing the things that you love that might not be on somebody else's list, but that really bring you joy and light you up. And I think we get caught in that vicious cycle of doing and tasks, and I just have to get through the day. And I think the
Yeah.
biggest reminder that I would love to give someone in this moment is like, what are you doing it for? Because if you're always waiting on someday, or if you're always waiting on, oh, I'll get to that when, or I'll have time to rest when, or I'll be happy when, like you're
Yeah.
investing in some theoretical future that is not right now. And we can only affect change and be in the present. So when you can recognize that in the present, you have the ability within you right now to own that and care for yourself and love yourself and truly believe in who you are and what you're doing in this world, that'll change everything. It'll change the way that you act. It'll change the direction that you head. It'll change the opportunities you seize. It'll change the products that you make. It'll change the content that you create. So my belief is that everything comes from there, what I like to try to communicate.
Wow, that was so powerful. And it makes me think about how you can't pour from an empty cup. And I know that's such a simple like analogy, but being in the online space where we have built these communities and we have clients and we have students and we're pouring out basically on a constant basis, you have to be able to pour from somewhere, right? And that comes with you filling up your cup every single day. And what you do to fill up that cup is going to look different for every single person. For some people, maybe that is going out and getting their nails done. For me, that's not what fills my cup. What fills my cup is getting outside and walking and spending time with my family. And so it's going to look different for every single person. But what brings something that comes to my mind here is I think a lot of people think, oh, well, it's really easy for you to say. You've been in business for X amount of time, or you've achieved X amount of success. And I think we hear a lot of entrepreneurs, and myself, I say this all the time too, where I'm like, oh, yeah, I even say I didn't need to work 12-hour days to be able to achieve the success that I had. I just needed XYZ things. And people are like, did you have to go through that to be able to learn and be able to get to the level that you're at? And I'm like, well, yes, but also no. And I'm like, learn from my mistakes. And so I think it's basically what I'm trying to say is for the people listening, I think it's hard when you're at the beginning of your business thinking like, oh, I don't even have time to prioritize self-care because I am just like trying to get this business started. I'm trying to get it off the ground running. And it's easy for someone like Michelle or someone like Maya to say, having had success in their business are making money in their business, to say, oh yeah, prioritize self-care. Does that make sense? What would you say to that
Yes.
person? I know what I would say to that person. And it's something that like I feel like any lesson that business owners learn, and even just what you were talking about with Arianna Huffington, like her saying that, I love that you're like, if someone at that level is saying something, I need to pay attention to that. But I think sometimes people don't have that same mindset where they're like, oh, well, it's easy for that person to say and it's not applicable for me. And I'll think about it later on when I start to achieve success.
Yes, I completely understand what you're talking about. I hear it all the time, and it really is in a hard truth kind of way. If you're listening, it really is an excuse, and it really
Mm.
is putting you in a place of victimhood. I want to be somewhat harsh in that way to help you realize that there are other avenues. So I'll start there. The other thing that I will add on to that is that having so much compassion for yourself through what it feels like you're capable of right now is really important. And this is how I work with clients in really encouraging that there is no shame or guilt related to what you're doing. So, just looking at it from, again, like a health perspective, a lot of times what happens is someone will want to start, let's just say a fitness routine, because that's easy. Someone says, I want to work out 3 times a week. Okay, great. So then they plan it, they've got it all going. They go to the gym. They start the first week, they go 3 times a week. The second week, they go 2 times a week. Maybe they slide down to one, and then they don't go at all. And then what
Yeah.
happens is they start to stew in the shame and the guilt. I should go to the gym. I was supposed to do this. I let myself down. I failed. And that just repeats the cycle of not being able to get back. And Mimi Bouchard, how are you familiar with Mimi Bouchard? She created the Superhuman app. Oh, you would love her and her stuff. Okay, she's wonderful. And she uses the term bounce back rate. And I don't use that same term, but the idea of being able to basically rebound in how you've quote unquote failed or the missteps that you have in what you're doing is really important. So, as
Mhm.
you're trying to prioritize yourself, if you're trying to implement self care, if you feel like it's not even an option right now, that's, I think, one thing to look at is what's going on in your head. What are the thoughts that you're telling yourself? Do you feel shame or guilt? Do you feel like, oh, Maya, Michelle, they can have work life balance, but I can't? And you're feeling some sense of, I need to or I should. That's something that needs to be looked at. And then the other
Mhm.
piece of it being is like, we're in debt with our businesses right now. We're not at a place that's profitable. technically speaking. I'm not sitting from this place of I am bringing home 7 figures a year, like everything is successful, I have nothing
Yeah.
to worry about. I'm sitting from a place of we're in debt with our businesses in order to grow and scale them. And yes, we're fine. We're not going to be homeless. We don't have any major issues that we're worrying about. So I understand that people are coming from potentially that place. And I want to say that I have understanding and compassion from that place. But at the same time, I have been in a place of way less finances and also way more time invested. And so, if there's anything that I've learned from a lot of my failures, it's not the time that you're investing. It's actually the way in which you're leveraging that time and the focus of your energy. Maya, you can post a reel and it'll get what, 1,300 comments, 800 comments? Like some of them get less, but I was just looking through. And
Yeah.
you can get hundreds of comments. Someone else can post a reel and they'll get 0 comments or 10 comments. Now, that's this. Let's just assume you took the same amount of time, the same energy, or you paid the same people, right? So you have the same financial investment, but your
Yeah.
outcome, your results are going to be different. And so when people meet this challenge and face this, I'm in the initial stages, I've got to hustle, I got to work really hard, I've got to do this, I've got to get through this, and there's no other way to do it. There's a couple things to look at. One, your mindset, those negative thoughts that are coming through your mind, the shame, the guilt, the I should, I have to, I'm expected to. And then also the reality of what you're putting in doesn't have to be quantity. Like it doesn't have to be that way. You can be more focused with your language up front. You can be more focused with your offer. You can do that refinement in order to leverage what it is that you're putting in to get more results. And I think a lot of times, and I'm guilty of this, I'm guilty of this every single day still because I'm learning, is the way in which we're investing our time, energy, and resources doesn't produce the results that we could have to create the freedom or allow us to prioritize differently. And I know you were at KHL last year, Kajabi Hero Live, and Graham Cochran gave this talk. Is that the way that he started in the online space was, I think, a 4-day work week because he took Friday off and the weekends off. And for a lot of people starting their business, they'd say, oh, I could never do that. I have to invest this time. But he was
Yeah.
able to demonstrate how he was able to do that. Now, was he making millions of dollars in the first year? No, I think I asked him. I think he came in around like $30,000 the first year and maybe $56,000 the second year. But then things started to grow exponentially. So again, it's more of that investment in the future. And I always like to think about it in terms of what am I willing to compromise now? I am not willing to compromise my health and well being. I'm not willing to compromise my sleep. I'm not willing to miss a workout for the potential of this thing that I'm investing time in to do this other thing or to get this success in my business. And then the last thing I'll say is really that comes from a place of boundaries. And when I first got started in my business, I felt like I needed to compromise on my boundaries to meet the needs of clients, to meet the needs of students, to meet the needs of an interview or a podcast, right? Like I was compromising on my schedule, my priorities, my needs. And then I just flip-flopped that. And I was like, wait, if I stay true and put a stronghold on my schedule right now with the things that I prioritize, everything else will fill in around it. And if it doesn't, then it wasn't meant to be at this time and there's going to be another opportunity. And I think that takes maybe time and maybe experience and having a sense of like confidence in what you're doing and the way you're showing up, but also again, having that deep sense of worthiness. Like if you I'm just actually starting Jamie Kern Lima's Worthy book, but if you're lacking a deep sense of worthiness and how you're meant to be treated by yourself and by others in the world, you'll compromise in every way possible and it won't even result in what it is that you're looking to accomplish or what it is that you want. So start with the boundaries, start with that idea of prioritization. And a lot of the things that you're doing and investing time in, they're not going to help anyway. That's just the hard truth of it.
I love that. That reminds me of a quote that I actually saw Justin Welsh post. He's really, really
Mm.
awesome. He said, I never focused on being wealthy. I just wanted to work less, help thousands of people, explore hobbies, spend time outside, cook with my wife, exercise a lot, and avoid silly meetings. So I optimized for life, not money. The money took care of itself. And I love that so much. And it also made me think about how for me, I love a good challenge. And so anytime that my brain is, oh, you can't do that, or like that so and so can do that, but that's not for you, I'm like, oh wait, now I'm going to try to do that. And it makes me think about when I found out that I was pregnant. I was like, okay, how can I maintain the level of business that I'm at, knowing that when I have a child, my schedule is going to be all over the place. I'm going to have less time. I'm going to be sleeping less. And I was like, okay, I'm up for the challenge. And so I think of it as what you were saying around the topic of, oh, so and so can prioritize self-care, but like I can't, or like I'll prioritize it when I get to XYZ place. But challenge yourself right now to prioritize it. And something that motherhood has taught me is you can get so much done in less time. So if it takes an extra hour for you to prioritize self-care, and that's 1 hour less that you have working your business, challenge yourself to accomplish the same amount in that 1 hour in the less time that you have, and you will be so surprised by what you can get done. And you hear this a lot. People will say, oh, well, if you give yourself 3 hours to clean your house, well, it's going to take you 3 hours. But if you give yourself 30 minutes, it's going to take you 30 minutes. And I remember laughing at that concept. But when I became a mom, I was like, that is so true. Like, I can get so much done when my daughter is napping for 1 or 2 hours. Like, I am like the most productive, efficient person in the entire world. I literally accomplish more in 2 hours, or I accomplish in 2 hours what I did prior to having her in an 8 hour workday. And so it's just all about challenging yourself and not ever having that limiting belief of, oh, that's possible for someone else, but it's not possible for me. So again, you said it way more eloquently than I could ever say it. So thank you for sharing that. I have one last final question for you. If you could go back to day one of your journey and give yourself any one piece of advice, what would it be?
In the simplest of terms, it would be to believe in what I'm doing. As I mentioned, when I felt like I was failing, it was because there was doubt. Because there was doubt in me. And I
Yeah.
really have fought for a very long time. And this, I have been through so many different kinds of therapies. That could be a whole other podcast in terms of hypnotherapy and past life regression and traditional talk therapy and other things that I won't talk about right now. And it's just so I've been through a lot, and I felt like there was a lot that I needed to navigate personally. Again, I said personal evolution and growth goes hand in hand with entrepreneurship and business.
Yeah.
And the things that I needed to evolve through had to get me to a place of worthiness, feeling worthy of being here, feeling worthy of being able to create content, feeling worthy of being heard. A lot of us have these internal belief systems that we have been carrying around for so long that inhibit us, that limit us, that keep us from taking the action that we quote unquote know we're supposed to do. So if we
Yeah.
procrastinate, if we put off, there are productivity tactics and ways in which to collapse time and actually get things done faster. But if there are things that you're just avoiding, it's probably more deeply rooted in an underlying belief system that you have about your ability to do it, whether that's fear of failure, fear of success, your lack of confidence in what you're doing, the self doubt, the lack of belief, like all of those things, the fear of judgment, the fear of criticism. We're in a space where we are putting ourselves out into the world to be torn down. Like we're putting ourselves into a place of severe vulnerability by sharing
Yeah.
our thoughts, sharing our ideas, our opinions, sharing parts of ourselves that we don't even share with friends sometimes. We have to establish like a really healthy sense of belief in who we are and what we're here to do. And if I could tell myself anything, it would be that is to truly believe in what I'm doing, who I am, what I'm here to do, and that I'm worthy of taking all of those necessary steps and actions in order to accomplish it.
Whew. That was a good. I'm just like every time you talk, I'm like mic drop, mic drop, mic drop, mic drop. Seriously, you were just absolutely amazing. And I know that people are going to want to hire you, work with you, learn from you more. So where can people find you and what offers do you have that people can jump into?
Yeah, so I'm actually just completely revamping an offer into what is Fit CEO from hustle to harmony. So it's almost everything that we talked about today in terms of behavior change. How you can go from that like overwhelm, chaos, frustration, I'm not working out, I'm not sleeping, I'm not taking care of myself, I'm not even taking breaks from away from the computer, which is resulting into lack of productivity, lack of focus, brain fog, mental clarity issues. And starting with that awareness piece and then evolving into removing and then adding in and really focusing on kind of the mindset piece. A lot of us have those negative dialogues or monologues, I guess I should say, but those internal thoughts that keep us from what it is that we're wanting to do, the change that we want to make, and how we want to evolve. So it addresses all of those things. So they can reach out to me at, and it's her, dot healthy, HEALTHY dot habits, HABITS on Instagram. That's the main place. I do take on clients for business and marketing consulting. It's few and far between, more word of mouth, or if they know me, it's not something that I'm like actively promoting right now. But if that is of interest, they can always find me in the same place and just mention the interest. I direct more attention to Fit CEO. And then I can share more about what I do in terms of the physical product business. Because if anyone is interested in learning about that, you can find it on Instagram at it's TOBE honest and Bev, BEV. So to be honest, Bev. And I'll give all of that to Maya. But that's a non alcoholic hemp infused spirit. So we didn't even get into this, but part of my growth process and really evolving to where I am now was actually stopping drinking. And I was
Mm.
struggling with mental health and anxiety at the time. And that has evolved into a physical product business, which is a non alcoholic hemp infused spirit alternative. And so it basically just replaces the liquor or alcohol in your mocktail or cocktail. And it's just it's a beautiful product. And what we found, if you were listening as someone who maybe has stopped drinking or paused drinking, is that you're often the afterthought of any occasion, celebration, night out. And this is really, really to make you the forefront of your experience, to elevate that experience and give you something to really enjoy and imbibe in that doesn't have any negative after effects. So, yeah.
Wow, you're just like the coolest person ever. I'm like waiting to bring you back for like 10 more episodes. I'm like, actually, just take over my entire podcast. All I want to listen to is you. So, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, for sharing your experiences, for your vulnerability. I appreciate you times 1000. And I will be definitely having you back on the podcast. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Maya. This has been absolutely wonderful. It's such a treat, and you're so kind. And I love everything that you bring to the world and that you bring to this space. So, really, you are such an inspiration for me.
Thank you.